In this fifth video of the Melody series, we will look at the idea of dynamics. Once we have written down a melody, it might be an interest to create some way of making that melody even more distinguished. One way that we can add further contrast into a song is through the use of dynamics. Simply put, dynamics is the volume of music. In other words, how soft or how loud can I be playing or singing at a certain time. As with tempo and other musical terms, dynamics are usually expressed in the Italian language. Here, we see a listing of the various dynamic markings along with their Italian term and English definition. Of these 8 terms, I would like to highlight the 2 most important, which are the terms piano, which means soft, and forte, which means loud. In fact, those 2 words, pianoforte, is the real name for the piano, which was the first keyboard instrument that could play at different levels of volume. Notice that if I add further copies of the same letter, that all that does is make it even softer or louder, respectively. The only other letter that's optional is the letter M, which stands for mezzo, which means medium or moderately in English. So if I would want something in between piano and forte, I could either express it as mezzo piano for the softer side, or mezzo forte for something closer to loud. With all of these dynamic markings, they are instantaneous, meaning once we see them in a song, we are at that level of volume now. If I would want to make a more gradual change of volume, as though I'm slowly turning up the dial on a stereo, I would use the symbols crescendo or decrescendo. These look like elongated hairpins, and as those 2 lines get further apart, my volume would get louder, as is the case with crescendo, or I could gradually get softer as they move closer together, as the case is for a decrescendo, which is also sometimes called a diminuendo or dim for short. To give a little bit further context as to what these dynamics actually sound like, here is a listing of various sounds that we encounter in real-world situations with their matching decibel levels and music dynamic markings. Notice that this normal conversation that I'm having would register as being mezzo piano and at approximately 60 decibel levels. Something like a rock band is much, much louder at 110 decibel levels, and in fact, it is actually registered beyond what the musical dynamic markings are. That is for one reason why people are often recommended to bring earplugs to make sure that they do not damage their hearing. When writing dynamics in music, notice in these examples that dynamics are always written below the staff. This is just simply to keep it consistent from one song to the next. Each of these 3 lines actually shows the same musical markings in different ways. We start soft, crescendo into the 3rd measure until we get loud, before returning back to soft over the course of the following 2 measures. Whether we use decrescendo or dim, or whether we use the hairpins or simply abbreviate those terms, either way is acceptable. I should note that the orchestra is also arranged by dynamics. The softest section, which would be the strings, is often found at the front of the orchestra. Right behind them would be the second softest, which would be the woodwind family. Then behind them would be the second loudest, the brass section. Last but not least, the loudest section in the furthest back would be the percussion section. The harp is located in the back, not because of its volume, but more because of its sheer size. In our next segment, we'll explore another way of adding contrast to music, and that is through the use of articulation.